Well, it's good to see you guys this morning. It's a good crowd here this morning. Good-looking bunch of folks, I'll tell you for sure. I'm going to preach today, beginning a series of sermons on the 11th chapter of Hebrews. And I was preparing to preach a 49-year-old cousin of mine's funeral this week. And I preached out of Hebrews chapter 11. And as I was preparing for that funeral, I just discovered so much information and so many wonderful preaching points that I wanted to preach a full sermon on it. And, you know, when you're preaching a funeral, you need to stop preaching after a couple of hours, you know, because people, that's not, anyway, so I'm going to save the rest of it for you today. But I want to talk about Hebrews chapter 11 because it's the chapter called the faith chapter. It talks about faith. And if you haven't read it in a while, just take some time this afternoon and just sit down and read the whole thing. It will bless your heart. I believe one of the most powerful forces in the universe is faith. It is in that group of three: faith, hope, and love. The greatest is love. That faith is right up there with them, and faith is the most important thing that we have in the Christian faith as to what we do. Faith is what we do. Now, you say faith is not a verb. Well, yeah, it is a verb in the original language. Now, we don't use the word faith in the English language. We say believe because we turn that into a verb. But it comes from the root pistos, P-I-S-T-O-S, but it is the same word. So if we use faith correctly in the English language, we say, well, I just had to faith it. I just faithed it. But you know what? That makes good sense for no hillbilly like me. I just faithed it. You know, when you came to a situation you didn't understand, you just faithed it. When you came up across something that was too big for you to handle, you faithed it. See, that's what we do with it. Now, physicists would say today that the strongest force in the universe is electromagnetism. And that's the thing that holds the atom together. That's what holds the neutron, the proton, the electron together is electromagnetism. And they call it the strong force. And what I would think was the strongest force is gravity, and they call that the weak force. That's the weakest of the forces in our universe. If you're writing comic books, the strongest thing you could think of would be Superman, right? Superman. A biologist might think the strongest thing would be a whale or an elephant. The musician would say it's a symphony. But today we are at the beating heart of the Christian experience. You don't get any more basic than talking about faith. Faith is what we do. Faith is who we are. That describes us completely. This is ground zero for Christianity. It's in the area of faith. Everything in the Holy Bible points to this category, the category of faith. And the road to heaven, it starts and ends with faith. That's how you get there. I will say this today many times, and let me say it again at the beginning, and when I say it again, I want you just to double underline it. Everything that we have as believers, Christians, we receive by faith. We get to heaven by faith. Let me say to you, and I want to say that I feel sorry for you if you're trying to be good enough to get to heaven. I really feel sorry for you. But man, you got a lot bit off to get to heaven by being good. Or some people they think, well, I'm going to get to go to heaven if I go to church. Well, no, folks, you can go to church every day from now on, and that would not give you faith. You say, well, I'm going to get to heaven by being good, well, or give a lot of money. Well, okay. Or maybe I'm going to get to heaven by being baptized. And as I said last week, you can be baptized so many times you know every crawdad by name down there at the creek. And you're still not going to get to heaven. What happens is faith has to be born in your heart. Faith between you and God alone. It's not between you and the church and God. It's between you and God alone. That's what faith is. And faith gets us started. Now, the writer of Hebrews defines faith in the light of Christ. And he talks about Jesus in this category and defines it by Christ. But then he goes on and points to a whole list of the ancient people in the Old Testament who lived and died by faith. Before we finish this study, what'd you do with my water?
Behind you.
Before we finish this study, we're going to be looking at a lot of individuals that talked about faith and how they used faith in their life. But I want to encourage your faith today. I want to challenge you to stop trying and start trusting. You've heard that before 1,000 times. Now, we've learned from the book of Colossians, by the way, we're studying that on Thursday nights. We've learned from that faith alone was a big step for the early church, the young church that was just getting started, the church in Colossae. They had come from some kind of background, so many different backgrounds. They came from Judaism, and they came from paganism, they came from asceticism. These are three different religious experiences, and they all came from them into the new Christian faith. The Jewish people came with a load of traditions they had to keep. Traditions and rituals and Sabbaths, and that's so they came with all that tradition. And they had trouble with Christianity because we don't have that many traditions. We don't have that many things we do. The asceticism, the group that came from the ascetics, they wanted to earn their way to heaven. So they would deny their flesh. They would, they would not take care of themselves. Sometimes they wouldn't wash. I tell you, the picture that I get of an ascetic is that monk sitting on a mountaintop in a wool robe, eating brown rice and yogurt and chanting. That's the ascetic. And some people have that mindset, and they think, well, if God's going to like me, I've got to work hard at it. I've got to do this and I've got to do that. Please write this down and don't forget it. Faith is first. We don't do to have faith. We do after we have faith. Faith leads us into goodness and good works, but doing never leads us to faith. All right? It has to start with belief, and that's where we are here at the Cowboy Church. That's what we tell you all the time. You don't get to heaven by what you do. You get to heaven because of who you believe in. Now, we've tried to answer this question, and I get asked a lot of times. People come to me and they'll say, Pastor, what do I have to do to go to heaven? And if you've ever wondered what you have to do to go to heaven, let me clear this up for you right now. You don't have to do anything. It's already been done. That's what Jesus did on the cross. He did the doing. You do the believing. All right? He did it. He did that. So all you have to do is to trust Him and believe in Him. So there was a little boy who went up to a great evangelist once, and it was the day after the revival ended, and they were having a tent meeting, and there were workers there taking the tent down and removing the PA equipment, the chairs, and packing it all up to leave. And the little boy came running up to the evangelist and said, "Oh no," he said, "it's too late, it's too late. I wanted to be saved." And the evangelist said, "Yeah, it's too late for you to be saved." And boy, that little boy thought, "Oh, this is horrible." And you may be thinking, well, that's just terrible to tell the little boy it's too late to be saved. The answer is, it's too late for you to do anything about it because Jesus has already done it. Now, on the cross, Jesus said he had several statements that He made. One of them was, "It is finished." It is finished. And I've told you this before, but I want to repeat it to bring you up to speed on this, because when Jesus said, "It is finished," that's what He meant. Salvation is finished. You can't add anything to it. It's closed completely. You can't add one thing to it. It's like when I was in a little kid in Bible school or Sunday school. I remember the teacher told us, she said, "Now, boys or girls, salvation is a gift, and God offers it to you. And it's a gift, and it's real, and it's yours, but you can't get it till you take it." See? That's how you make it yours. You bring it, you receive it. Oh, thank you for the gift. And that's what salvation is. It's a free gift to you, but He won't force it on you. You're never going to make you have it. It's something you have to want and receive. Now, faith is better than any other religious plan or ideal. And if you're looking for a belief system that makes sense, that just makes sense, and you are going to feel comfortable, you're not going to find it in Christianity. Now, why does that? I'm not saying that Christianity I'm not saying it doesn't make sense. It does, but it seems to so anti-human because we want to do something. And you can't do something to be saved. You have to trust the Lord Jesus Christ. So if you're looking for a religion that is real and genuine and built on faith, then come to Christ. Nothing is better than faith, hope, and love. Now, I'm going to spend the rest of the time this morning with you talking about and trying to show you from Hebrews chapter 11 why faith is so powerful, why it has such impact in your life, and why it can do so many wonderful things for your life. I want to start by saying that it can turn hope into reality. Faith turns hope into reality. Let's read verse 1. Now faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see. This is what the ancients were commended for. The ancient people in the Bible, the old folks, were commended because they believed. They had faith, and it turned into reality. Do you remember Job? Job was a fellow in the New Testament, in the Old Testament. He has a book written about him called the Book of Job. And in this book, this man had all kinds of trouble. I mean, stuff bad happened to this man. His crops failed, his cattle died, his children died. It was horrible, the things that happened to him. And his wife got so discouraged. Well, he did too. But his wife was so discouraged, and she came to him and she said, Job, won't you just curse God and die? Just give up. Just curse God and die. And Job then began to make some of the most profound statements that we hear in the whole Bible. And he said these words. He said, no, I'm going to hold my faith. I'm going to hold faith because I know my Redeemer liveth. He says, I know he lives. And on the earth, one day he will stand. Now, Job lived in a day before Jesus has ever even been here. See, he just looked forward to that by faith. But he said, I know my Redeemer liveth. And then he said, and even though the worms eat my body in the grave, he said, I know that with my eyes, these eyes, I will see God. What faith that man had. What faith. I wonder if we would have had that kind of faith if so many bad things had happened to us. Well, Job, thank you for teaching us how to turn hope into reality. Faith can make our hope real. Now, faith also explains the origin or the beginnings of everything. Faith explains why we're here, how we got here, what we're to do, and where we're going. Nothing else explains that, but faith does. Let's read verse 3. By faith we understand that the universe was formed at God's command. Ladies and gentlemen, this universe exists on purpose. It didn't just randomly create itself. There wasn't another dimension that had a burp and burped over into this dimension and started this. I mean, that's what many physicists may tell us. Or I tell you what, this universe began on purpose. Here's how it happened for me. I'm going to talk in hillbilly language to you, but here's how it happened for me. God stepped out on his front porch one morning and took an atom, A-T-O-M, a singularity, a simple point of existence. And he took it from his dimension, the spiritual dimension, and he pushed it through his membrane of dimension out into a place where nothing existed before. And then that little atom expanded rapidly. They call it the Big Bang. And this atom expanded and filled our entire universe with everything we know. God made everything from nothing. Now, when I was little, we would go to school, Bible school, and the teacher would say, tomorrow, kids, I want you to bring a coffee can with you. And we'd go home and say, Mama, we need a coffee can. Well, Mother knew we were going to do this, so she already had 2 or 3 saved up. And we'd bring them back to Bible school or Sunday school. The teacher would take them and they'd put crepe paper around them. They'd tape it on there, and we'd cut out little flowers and birds, and we'd paste them on that. We'd go out in the parking lot and fill it with gravel, and then we'd stick plastic flowers in it, right? Well, we made and we created a little pretty thing for the house. We did here for our moms. We created it out of things that already existed. The coffee can already existed, the gravel pre-existed, the little flower pre-existed. Everything was already there. We just put it together. But when God made the universe, there wasn't anything here that he used to make it. He used nothing. He used absolutely from nothing. He made everything. The Latin language has a phrase that expresses it. I just love to say it because it sounds so cool. God, out of ex nihilo, out of nothing, God made everything out of nothing. Let's read it. By faith we understand that the universe was formed at God's command. And then he says, so that what is seen was not made out of what it was visible. Out of nothing, God made everything. Now there's some guys in the Old Testament that we learned about that had tremendous faith. There were three boys, three Hebrew children. And they got in trouble with the king. They got in trouble with the king. They wouldn't worship or bow down to him. They wanted to stay faithful and worship Jehovah God. So they said, no, we're not going to bow down and worship you. He said, if you don't, I'm going to burn you alive. He said, God, King, you got to do what you got to do. But we're not going to bow our knee and worship you. We worship God alone. So they took those three Hebrew boys, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and they threw those three boys into a furnace of fire. Now the fire was so hot that it killed one or two of the men that were putting the Hebrew children in the fire. It was that hot. It flashed out, flamed out, caught them on fire, and they died. But here's the cool part. The three Hebrew boys, by faith, walked around in that fire for hours and never even got burned. Said that their clothes didn't even smell like smoke. Now Nebuchadnezzar was stepping back up there and he said, how many did we throw down in that fire? And he said, well, we threw three. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He said, I see four. There's four down there. And they said to him, and he said, and Nebuchadnezzar said, and the fourth one looks like the Son of God. I want to tell you who it was. It's Jesus. Before Bethlehem, he was there in that fire with those three Hebrew boys walking around. And I love to tell these stories. Like somebody said, well, what happened to Jesus when they let the boys out? Where's Jesus? I said, he's still in the fire.
That's right.
He's still in the fire. That means when you get in the fire, he's already going to be there. When the doctor says cancer, he's already in the fire with you. When your husband says or your wife says divorce, he's already in the fire with you. When your banker says, whoops, you're out of money, he's in the fire with you. He's already there. So, trust him. Daniel, in the same book, Daniel was thrown into a lion's den, and he spent the night there with a bunch of hungry lions, slobbering and salivating. I just know they was hungry. But they wouldn't eat him because God had locked their jaw by faith. So faith makes all that happen. Now, another thing that happens to faith is faith makes what we're doing right now, this thing called worship, but that's what we're doing. We've come together and we're worshiping here today. We worship by singing, by shaking hands and hugging each other, and by studying God's Word, by praying. That's how we worship, and that's what we're doing here. Now, we could do the same things at a PTA meeting or at any other thing, right? But what happens here, it turns what happens here into a miracle of actuality, of life and meaning. Let's read verse 4. By faith, Abel offered God a better sacrifice than Cain did. And you're sitting there thinking, okay, preacher, who's these guys? Who's Cain and Abel? Well, they were the first boys born to the human race. Adam and Eve, this was their boys, Cain and Abel. And they grew up just outside the Garden of Eden. They heard Mom and Daddy say, we talk with God every night. God would come walk in the evening with us. We'd walk with Him and talk with Him here at the Garden of Eden. And they tell the boys about God, and the boys loved the Lord. And they saw that Mom and Daddy loved Him, and they wanted to love God, and they wanted to worship Him. So now in the Old Testament, they worshiped by bringing sacrifices to God. They would kill an animal or grain or something they'd bring to God, and they burned it up in smoke, and that was their form of worship. They just offered up to God. That was worship. So when Cain and Abel came, both brought their offering. One offering was accepted, one offering was not accepted. And if you wonder why God accepted one and not the other, Hebrews tells us. Because Abel offered his sacrifice in faith, and God accepted it and approved of it. Cain's offering may have even been more expensive, but it lacked the faith element. So friends, when you come here today, and as we sit here, sing and laugh and pray and read our Bible, and we worship God, we're worshiping Him in faith. And that's what makes this so precious and powerful. Express your faith when we worship. And even here in the stockyards. Now, another thing faith does, it makes a sinner a saint. It does. Let's keep reading. By faith, he was commended. This is Abel now. Remember the two boys? By faith, he was commended as a righteous man when God spoke well of his offerings. God took faith, Abel's faith, and he translated it into righteousness. God said, because you have faith, Abel, I'm going to now call you a saint. You're not a sinner anymore. I'm going to receive you by faith. And that's how it works, folks, for us today, still yet. And then it says, and Abel still speaks. Let's read there. And by faith he still speaks, even though he is dead. Well, Abel's story is still speaking to us today. We're still talking about it. After these many thousands of years, that little experience still is a part of our lives. What does that say to me and you? Well, it says this. Our faith activity, what we do in faith, will outlive us. It will go on for generations. Your kids will talk about it. Your grandkids will talk about your faith. You'll be remembered for generations because you have faith. You see, that's why it's so important that we pass this faith on to our children. And I pray today that if you're here and you're young, you're hearing this and your faith is being born in your heart, because it's the most important thing you'll ever do. Now, as I close, I want to tell you one more story. This is a story about a man named Enoch. Enoch was an Old Testament character, a prophet, a preacher. We don't know a lot about him, except he was extremely eccentric and extremely faithful. He loved God. He believed in God so much. Even though he couldn't see God, he walked with God, and they would talk together. I can just see this, Enoch and God, out walking and talking today in their world. And it got close to sundown, and Enoch said, God is quite a ways back now to home. And God said, well, yeah, I just want you to come spend the night with me. So Enoch went to heaven without dying. But it was all done by faith. This is how this works. Let's read it there, verse 5. By faith, Enoch was taken from this life, so that he did not experience death. He could not be found because God had taken him away. For before he was taken, he was commended as one who pleased God. Now, how do you please God? By faith. So he was commended as one who pleased God. And you say, okay, that's cool. Enoch never died, and he went to heaven. Let me tell you something. You're going to do the very same thing. You say, now wait a minute. That's not true, because I go to funerals. I know people die. Let me tell you what happens when you die. You walk through the valley of the shadow of death. You walk through it. Your body dies, but you don't. You walk through the valley of the shadow of death. And just like Enoch, you're just going to walk home to be with the Lord. That's how that's going to work. Because your faith is going to commend you as a righteous man. And so, how do you get to heaven? By faith. See, don't go to God when you die and walk up to the gate and say, well, let me in now, because I was a preacher. Don't say, well, that's good. I'm glad you had a good time. I don't cut it here. Don't go and say, I'm going to let me in because I was a good husband. Well, yeah, I'm glad you were, but that don't work. You get into heaven when you believe in Jesus Christ. That opens the door. It insulated the Hebrew children. It kept the lions from eating Daniel. It took Enoch home. Even as he walked through that valley of death, it took him home. Once in a while, I'll say something very profound. I'm going to say it right now. So if you take notes, you might want to write this down. I don't say it very often. Religion is a substitute for faith.
That's right.
Religion is a substitute for faith. Some people want religion. They want to do all the stuff. They want to be thought of as religious. They want to look religious. So they do it. Religion is a substitute for faith. God doesn't care about your religion. He does care about your faith. By faith, we go to heaven. By faith, we move mountains. By faith, we live for the Lord. Day by day. By faith, not by works or good works. Faith defies logic in some way. It's counterintuitive. It's kind of the reversal of common sense, because we think we want to do something. But listen now, faith is trusting God, period. Faith is not trusting God and or but or plus. It's faith is trusting God, period. So when God comes to you and And I suspect that He has, or even now is, coming to you, and He says, I want you to follow me. I want to be a part of your life. Here's the gift. Here's my gift of life for you. Come and accept it. Be my friend. Be my follower. And walk through the valley of shadow of death when you die. Be that. And God will say, here it is. And we say, thank you, God. That's a great idea. I'll think about it. That's not accepting the gift. But when you say, yes, I'll take it for me, that's salvation. I've got a little story I tell. I bet I've told it 1,000 times. You've heard it a million. Just grin and act like you never heard it before. When I was young, my father and my brothers, we kind of farmed a little bit, and Daddy, we'd haul hay, we'd bale hay and haul hay, and we'd put it into a barn loft there at the barn at the house, and we'd pull it in there. We boys put it on the wagon. Dad'd help. We'd pull it in. Dad would be on the wagon, and the boys would be up in the barn loft. Dad'd throw the hay up into the loft. We'd drag it back, stack it. That was our job. Now, we were little, and when you got there, the hay was right at the barn door. You just stepped over into the barn loft, nothing big deal. But when you got the trailer, the wagon empty, it was a long way down there. And we didn't know how to get out. We'd say, Daddy, how are we going to get down? And listen, Daddy'd say, boys, just jump and I'll catch you. Just jump, boys, I'll catch you. My dad was a big, old shouldered guy. And we didn't question it. We didn't bail out of that barn loft. We knew Dad'd catch us. Why didn't Dad catch us? No sweat. We just bailed out. We had faith that Daddy would catch us. And I had trouble as a teenager and a little older, intellectually accepting my faith. I thought, is there really a God? Is this? Well, I thought to myself, well, what happens? What happens if Jesus doesn't save me? And I finally just said, Jesus, here's what I'm going to do, Jesus. I'm going to jump out of it into eternity, and if you don't catch me, I'm going to go to hell. And that's when I was assured of my faith. From that moment on, I never doubted it again. When I said, and I realized that when I jump off into eternity, if God doesn't catch me, I'm gone.
That's right.
Because He, just like my daddy, He'll catch you. Never fails. So, how do you express your faith? Jump out of the barn loft. Just jump. Express your faith. Here I am, God. If you miss me, I'm gone. And that's how you get to heaven. By faith in the Lord Jesus Christ. Not trying to be good, not trying to do good things. Faith. Just faith it. Lord,